So as I keep thinking about trades and how they were perceived initially and what ended up happening, I think the Paul George to OKC trade ends up being pretty wild. The Pacers moved, they got Oladipo and Sabonis, and that was it. And I remember at the time, pretty much everybody was like, wow, the Pacers got robbed and then some for Paul George. Turns out they were smarter than all of us. And this is the thing that's always funny to me, and I say this as someone who was probably on that side as well. It is fun when all of us are reminded, oh, we actually don't know crap and we're not the ones in the front offices. Sometimes we end up feeling smart and seeing front offices be stupid, but when they prove us wrong, I do find it pretty funny. Now, do we learn from this? No, not at all. But it is kind of funny to look back on. Now, before I talk about Sabonis and Oladipo and how good those two have been, I do just want to talk about the Paul George situation by itself, because it was a pretty fascinating thing where there were so many rumors beforehand about how PG wanted to be in LA. I mean, I remember there being a belief, even when this trade happened, that the Thunder were just going to be Paul George's one-year stop to Los Angeles, and that ended up being true, even if it wasn't for the reasons that we all envisioned. And I do remember around the time there were various rumors. I remember first it started out with the Pacers were not going to trade him no matter what, which I guess looking back, it makes sense that they felt that way, at least for a little bit, because Larry Bird's in that organization, and he always had the mentality of, well, if you're under contract and you're healthy, then you're going to play, and that's that. But at a certain point, they just had to accept this guy's not going to come back. And personally, I kind of wish PG did stay in Indiana, because I think it just would have been cool to have one guy in one place for a long time, because of course we don't get that a super lot anymore. I mean, I'm hoping that for my Celtics, at least Jason Tatum can be that. In a perfect world, it's Tatum and Jalen, but at this point, maybe just having one is enough of an accomplishment. So it just seemed like Indiana had to clash with all of that, because I think you could also argue that this whole star player making it known they want to be moved a year before their contract ends thing, I don't know if Paul George was the first one to really get that ball rolling, but I feel like he was one of the early ones nonetheless, you know? And since then we've seen Kawhi, we've seen Anthony Davis, a couple others that I might not remember off the top of my head, but you know, the PG thing was definitely one of them. And I remember the rumors, it was something like the Celtics were thinking about it and the Lakers were in on it, but at that point, Paul George was supposed to be the first guy for the Lakers. That was another thing too. It was like, they didn't have LeBron yet, so it was like, well, how are we going to get our one-star player? Well, Paul George is going to be the guy, and again, he ended up in LA, but just not how we foresaw. It was really gutsy of the Pacers. I mean, to be fair, I don't know who actually offered what. There's a chance the Celtics didn't offer anything. I mean, at this time, they did have the lottery picks in some way. I think this was before the Kyrie trade. Yeah, it was by about 2 months. So it's like if the Celtics made a real offer with that Nets pick, would the Pacers, like, did they have a moment of, well, we could go for that, or we could go for the guarantee of two players who haven't hit their stride yet, but we think we can get them going in the right direction? I mean, it's impossible to know, but clearly they ended up with the ideal package anyway. And that's always an interesting thing, if teams want to go for the rebuild and the picks and the process, or do you just want to get a couple guys who you think you can turn into much better players? I think Minnesota attempted to do that with the Jimmy Butler trade when they traded Jimmy to the Sixers. Granted, Jimmy's stock was very low at that point, but I guess that would be this trade, but not done as well. You know, getting Covington and Saric, whereas getting Oladipo and Sabonis, total home run for the Pacers. The crazy thing is how miscast Sabonis was in OKC. I mean, they were asking him to stretch the floor for Westbrook and stuff. And if you just look at Sabonis's second year in college, he averaged 18 and 12, and he shot about 6 free throws a game. And for whatever reason, none of us were smart enough to just go, hey, wait a minute, before we decide whether this guy's good or not, let's see if OKC was actually using him the right way. Well, it would have been pretty obvious they weren't. He only attempted 14 threes in college, and yet they were asking him to be a stretch guy. So it was just smart on Indiana's part to just look at his skill set and be like, well, yeah, if we just have him do what he's supposed to be doing, which is being a center and doing stuff around the basket and rolling to the rim, then yeah, he's going to be good. And he made his first All-Star team this year, and I believe I had him for third team center, and he was awesome. And his playmaking has been great as well. 5 assists a game, and the Pacers are using him in, post-ups, and he's got action around him, or he can see guys while he's rolling to the rim, open shooter in the corner, that type of thing. So they were right on him 100%. And it also makes you question what OKC was doing when they drafted him. Like, did they draft him to be one thing, and then it was like, oh, wait a minute, we need you to do this other thing because we have no other way to get you in there? I mean, the 2017 OKC Thunder, how many centers did they have? They had Steven Adams, of course, and then after that, it was kind of not much. Oh, they had Cantor. So, okay, you had Adams and Cantor, and I guess they just envisioned the only way we can get Sabonis in there like that is if we play him at the 4. Clearly wasn't meant to do that. And then we move on to Oladipo, and this one was the instant return, because Sabonis, he didn't really start to become exciting until probably last year for Indiana. I mean, he was good the first year they had him, but the second year is when it became like, oh, wait a minute, they might really have something here. The crazy thing with Oladipo was, I think he had his worst year with the Thunder that season before the Pacers traded for him. So it could have just been a major swing of the bat for them, where they were just saying to themselves, man, we know this guy wasn't too awesome, but playing off of Russ and just how the entire thing was running through him, and they just saw something in Oladipo, and they were like, if we can get that guy into what we're doing and we can allow him to take more shots and all that, then he can be really awesome. And of course he was. And Oladipo is one of those guys where sometimes you just got to hang on to somebody a little longer than you would envision before they become awesome. I mean, what was he picked in the draft? It was 3rd pick, 4th pick, 2nd pick is what it was. And those first few years with Orlando, he wasn't great, and the Magic definitely regret getting off of him now. I remember the move for him. It was like Oladipo to the Thunder for Ibaka, and that one was, safe to say that one was a pretty questionable decision. Choosing to give up on Oladipo for the instant impact of Serge Ibaka, I mean, okay, I guess. Sometimes you just got to stick with guys for a little while. I mean, I guess that's kind of what we're hoping for with like Andrew Wiggins, for example, right? But I do remember another thing with Oladipo was he lost a bunch of weight in that offseason because he did look sluggish at times for OKC, and I don't know if Indiana just kind of knew that Oladipo was going to do that, or if he did it and then they were like, well, now we should trade for him. I don't totally know. Now, the interesting thing is, since then, he's dealt with injuries, and it's potentially going to be 3 years since we've seen that really good 2018 Oladipo. So that's a little frightening. But we assume if he's just good to go, then he's going to be awesome once again. I mean, he has been really unlucky with injuries since this, but still, I do remember the initial reaction of the trade was, really? Like, the Pacers are just going to be this mediocre team? And I think you can make a case now that if Oladipo was 100%, they'd be pretty frightening in the Eastern Conference. As far as where they would fall, I don't know, but they're, They're 2 games worse than Miami and 4 games worse than the Celtics, and that's with all this Oladipo injury stuff, so take that for whatever you will. But the one thing we'll all agree on, because it's just a straight up fact, is the Pacers got 2 All-Stars in the Paul George trade when we all thought at the time that they did really badly. And I think that should be commended, because we spend a lot of time crapping on teams and organizations, but sometimes you gotta give them praise when it's due, and I think the Pacers definitely deserve it.